Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Ivanka Trump, the advisor and daughter of US President Donald Trump, has said that the Global Entrepreneurship Summit co-hosted by India and America is a testament to their growing economic and security partnership. Ivanka will be leading a delegation of senior Trump administration officials and entrepreneurs at the three-day summit in Hyderabad beginning tomorrow. The summit will be inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. More than 1,200 young entrepreneurs, a majority of whom are women, from 127 countries would attend the event. In addition to that, some 300 investors and startup ecosystem supporters are also attending the mega event. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Global Entrepreneurship Summit to begin in Hyderabad tomorrow. Joining me on the program today are A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard, Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, DIPP, Nishith Acharya, former Senior Advisor to US Secretary of Commerce, and Krishna Sarma, Managing Partner, Corporate Law Group. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to start with the lady on the program first. Krishna Sarma, what do we expect from this summit?
I'm glad that this kind of a summit is being held in India, and this is the first time that it's being held in this region actually, and that the focus is on women and entrepreneurship. I hope that this helps address many of the issues that are faced by women entrepreneurs in India. And I'm sure I was like part of the run-up to this final meeting in Delhi. And we saw how the young women entrepreneurs voiced their difficulties. One primary one being, the need for finance and that I hope as a result of outcome of this, there is some addressing of these issues. Okay,
sure. Let me bring in Mr. Bhattacharya into the picture now. Mr. Bhattacharya, several young entrepreneurs, startups are going to be a part of this particular summit. How does a summit, tune into some of the schemes that we have started, for that matter, Make in India or Startup India?
I'm not that excited by the overall focus on it just being a woman entrepreneur thing, because I think this is much larger than just it being a woman entrepreneurship summit. The focus on the startup element, the startup segment of the Indian industry, and that it is done in association with the US, which is the mecca of startups. I think it gives me a lot of hope. I would imagine that as many as 500 entrepreneurs, I believe, are going to be there from different parts of the world. And the Indian entrepreneurs who have made some initial foray into the startup space will probably get an exposure to the kind of initiatives that are necessary and the kind of the financial and innovation technology, the interplay of all these things take place. So it will probably be unfair to say that it is about women. I think the focus is on entrepreneurship, and that women are part of it is kind of the icing on the cake, because it also means more inclusive. So it's inclusion, it's technology, it's innovation, and it is with the US, which is at the forefront of the startup movement. So therefore, I am personally looking forward to this summit and what it entails for the fledgling Indian startup space, because while the movement has begun in this country on the startups, but we have seen the early stage funding of startups in India have actually declined by as much as 41%, which means that the burst that you saw has actually slowed down a bit. So therefore, it is happening at the right time and is happening with the US being around. So I'm looking forward to some takeaways for the Indian startup sector, what they can do, what they need to do in the current environment, which is probably the biggest benefit of this.
Sure. Let me bring in Nish Acharya into the picture now, who's joining us from the US. Nish, as a former senior advisor to the US Secretary of Commerce, how do you look at this summit and what do you think are going to be the takeaways of the summit really?
So I had the privilege of serving in the Obama administration, working for President Obama as Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship and Senior Advisor when we started the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. And I remember last year when we were in Silicon Valley at Stanford's campus, there was a lot of excitement when India was announced as the host of the 2017 summit. And that was because we were in the middle of Silicon Valley, where roughly 15% of the startups have an Indian American founder, which is just amazing when you think about Silicon Valley. And India has become the second largest country in terms of actual startup activity. And so it was natural that if we were to continue this conference and this global conversation about entrepreneurship, that India would be the host. Now, a lot of things have changed since last June 2016. And I think the big opportunity this year is not from the US side, but really from the Indian side. And what I mean by that is that India received some good news a few weeks ago. It really rose in the rankings for the Doing Business report that the World Bank puts out. And I think it's important that senior Indians who speak at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit really discuss a vision for going beyond that jump. So what I mean by that is it's nice that it's easier to start a business in India, but that hasn't really stopped any foreign entrepreneurs or investors from coming. What I would like to see the Indian delegation speak about is now how are they going to transform that into a more inviting climate for startup creation, for angel investment, which is the early stage investment, and for recruiting top talent from around the world to come to India's startups. So I think it's really an opportunity much more for India to showcase its capabilities and its vision on the world stage. I think for the United States, they are not sending a high-level delegation other than Ivanka Trump, who doesn't have an official portfolio. And there isn't a lot announced on the policy side from the U.S. side. But for India, I think it's a good chance to build on the news of a few weeks ago and to highlight for the world its entrepreneurial class, which some people are starting to know, the Flipkarts and the Snapdeals and that sort of thing. But now really that it's much, much broader. And also that it's more than just Bangalore and Hyderabad, that it's, hopefully there's some showcase of startups and visionary entrepreneurs from across the country. So I hope India takes advantage of that opportunity.
Sure. Mr. Shankar, do we need to start looking beyond our IT hubs of Bengaluru and Hyderabad and spread our wings really and concentrate on some other sectors as well, other than just software, as far as some of these startups are concerned?
No, I think this is very important for India in two ways. One is that we are really recognizing the importance of entrepreneurship and seeing entrepreneurship as the way to the creation of wealth and jobs. Now, historically, that has not been a position of India. We have not nurtured entrepreneurship and we have not seen that as the route to achieving our development goals. The other very important thing is the partnership with the US in this endeavor, because US has shown to the whole world what entrepreneurship can achieve. And US has the ecosystem, the dynamism, the venture capital, the angel investors who can make entrepreneurship really happen. And it's a good thing that the Indian community in the US is at the center of a lot of this. So this partnership between India and the US and the special role which the Indians in the US can play in nurturing startups and entrepreneurship in India. And the US space for entrepreneurship is across the entire spectrum. And our hope and ambition should be that in India, we go beyond IT to the entire spectrum of economic activities and have entrepreneurship which gives us great success. In fact, one of the early success stories of entrepreneurship was the Apollo hospitals. Dr. Reddy came back from the US, and when he said he wanted to run hospitals on a commercial basis, everybody thought that this is not what can be done. So we have to look at entrepreneurship across the spectrum. And I think it's also very important that women are the focus, because women have enormous talent, enormous potential, and as a country, we've been slow in giving them the space that they need to occupy. So I think it's very important that we
talking about
create the right atmosphere, the right ambition, the right ecosystem.
Krishna Sharma, talking about not giving the space to women entrepreneurs in this country, what do you believe needs to be done so as to see more women bloom and more women take up entrepreneurial, responsibilities?
Some of the issues, outstanding issues, are legal. So that needs to be addressed in some way. Some are actually social. So legal would be like, despite the law having changed after 1956, that women can own properties. In reality, the properties usually goes to the boy or the man of the house, and it usually is written, even if it's like two siblings, the daughter would write it for the son, for the brother, and that actually has a very fundamental influence on the ability to go get a loan, because you need a collateral. Hardly anything. I am a lawyer, but I started a law firm. So in a way, I'm an entrepreneur in the legal space. And it was very, very difficult to go out and get, that initial money, which is absolutely a make or break in terms of seeding of an entrepreneurship. The other issue is, again, I believe, the industry organizations like FICCI did take it up with the RBI. Even today, if you sign up a loan agreement with a bank, you have to give your husband's, name, and these are more probably, significant in a way that women, a single person, still doesn't have that status. You will not believe it. In the Bar Council of India, they did a revamp of all our memberships, and one of the things was we were very surprised. There's so many women lawyers, but actually right up there was husband's name. Really, this is 2017 you're talking about. So I think some of them are legal issues, some of them are social issues, and some of them I think just that outlook one needs to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Bhattacharya, Mr. Shankar spoke about looking beyond the IT space for some of our startups.
That's
what
right.
are some of the sectors that we can probably concentrate on? What are our strengths beyond IT?
Well, I think if you look at the way the Indian economy has grown in the last decade or so, I would say the services sector is a huge opportunity area, and this is an area which is also waiting to be tapped by the women entrepreneurs as well, because services by its very nature, the sector, are more amenable to women entrepreneurs' skills. So I would say hospitality is a huge area. Mr. Shankar talked about medical services, healthcare services is a huge area. Food business, which is a big area, and it is not just producing food, but it is also delivering food. So I think the services sector will be a huge opportunity for the entrepreneurship to go beyond IT. And if you take a look at India's new startup space, you will see that the startup space, it is not just the IT guys who are doing well. It is also the restaurant guy, the hospitality sector guy, even a grocer is doing well. So therefore, you have to take a look at the entire services sector if you want to really give entrepreneurship a push. And in addition, I would say that while we focus on entrepreneurship, which is India's strong point traditionally, there are states which are famous for the entrepreneurship. Gujarat is a state which is famous for entrepreneurship.
Yes.
But I think we should not at the same time underestimate the importance of at least a couple of other factors of production that are necessary for a successful project, successful idea to fructify itself, which is both land and labor. And I would add capital to this. So while we focus on entrepreneurship, which is important for an idea to be born, we cannot underestimate the importance of the other factors of production, particularly land, labor, and capital, which are also going to be a challenge. And my understanding is that in this Global Ship Entrepreneur Summit, even these areas, particularly the capital side, that will also be taken up.
Sure. Nishith, Acharya, earlier in the program, we were talking about angel investment not coming into India and investment being a problem really. As far as investment from the United States is concerned, what is a deterrent really for companies in the United States or individuals in the United States to invest in India?
So I would say they're actually, I think, detriments in terms of not having a bilateral investment treaty. So investment into India has to, go through some hoops, such as going through Dubai or going through Mauritius or Singapore. And that's something certainly the Indians and the U.S. need to work on. But I don't think it's a good use of anybody's time to focus on because the Trump administration is not interested in trade deals and investment treaties. And so that doesn't look like it's in our future. I think the more important thing is for India to really showcase that it's playing this conference is about leading a global conversation about entrepreneurship and showcasing India as the moderator, the facilitator of that conversation. That's what's going on this week in Hyderabad. And so I think for that, what the Indians really need to take advantage of is to showcase the high quality capabilities of their entrepreneurs. And for me, I think it's at both ends of the spectrum. So at the high end of the spectrum in the United States, a lot of the investment is going to areas like big data analytics, drones, self-driving automated cars, artificial intelligence. And if you actually walk around the startup scene in India, there's actually quite a few startups working on those exact same things. And yet I think there's a disconnect either with the Silicon Valley or with investors in India that the opportunity is there for India to also be a world leader in these spaces. And so I think some of it is simply showcasing that the Indian companies and startups are actually competing at a high level. The other is I think it depends how you calculate angel investment. So for another sector of investment, which is actually quite large, which is really those entrepreneurs that are focused on societal benefit, and they're for profit, but they are looking at the base of the pyramid or the working class in India. Avishkar, which is a big fund, just announced a 600 crore fund just last week. And India is home to a large number of the most innovative and technologically advanced investors in areas like clean water filters or diagnostics for public health tests and healthcare for the working poor, for the poor in India. And this is a 600 million, 700 million person market when you include working class and lower middle class Indians. And so it's just a big market. It's not really, community service. It's a very large market. And there we're seeing lots of investment from the United States and elsewhere. So I think when we think about angel investment, we should say, are Indians really getting the message out there about, what they can offer? And then I think the capital will find a way. I think, if it has to be through Mauritius or Dubai, and then that's what it is. I think that's the critical thing. The one thing policy-wise, I would say it is important for the U.S. and India to think about is what's called technology transfer, and that deals a little bit with intellectual property. And I'm not talking about the normal challenges that the U.S. and India have around intellectual property and medications. I'm talking about more early-stage technology being developed now, where it's a little bit easier for joint agreements to be made between the countries or between companies around licensing and revenue. And I think if the U.S. and India can say that we're jointly going to think about dealing with intellectual property at an earlier stage, then I think that a lot of investment and innovation can cross borders from the U.S. to India as well as from India to the U.S.
Sure. Mr. Shankar, this issue of technology transfer is something that we've been talking for several years now and it's just not happened. Do you see that happening anytime in the near future? What needs to be done really so that we can get the best technology and help our entrepreneurs?
No, I think we need to be a little futuristic. India today is at a stage where it can be a significant player and a leader in innovation and technology development and product development. The cost of product development has crashed with the artificial intelligence, simulation, 3D printing, etc. And we have a lot of very bright young people doing lots of good work. In fact, I had the privilege of visiting IIT Mumbai, and I see an enormous potential in the field of medical devices. So we need to create in India an atmosphere and a buzz around entrepreneurship. So a young talented person who wants to become an entrepreneur, an ecosystem where people are willing to bet on him, and both he and those who bet on him make enough money. The base of entrepreneurship needs to widen and become more inclusive in terms of regions, in terms of communities, in terms of classes. And it is only when we achieve that that we will really get rid of poverty and create enough jobs. And I think it needs a very major push internally, a lot of ambition, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of facility.
Do we need some policy level changes as well?
More than that, attitudinal changes.
Okay.
I mean, bankers can fund a startup. And there's nothing which prevents a banker from betting on a startup and funding him. So we need a change in mindsets. I mean, why does the US succeed? If you have a bright youngster with ideas, somebody or the other is willing to fund you in Silicon Valley. Let's get that going in India.
Sure.
And not only in Bangalore, but across the country.
Across the country, not just Bangalore and Hyderabad. You know, talking about research, Mr. Bhattacharya, we've seen that, you know, as we don't spend enough on R&D in this country. Do you believe that that needs to be addressed as well? And can we expect some corporates funding R&D and, you know, trying to take that push or pushing that further?
Yes, you know, ideally, yes. I think that today, if you look at the entire spectrum of the India Inc., you find that the investments and expenditure made in R&D are at abysmally low levels, you know, 1.2 or 2%. And even if you take the pharma companies, the kind of R&D that is there is actually not real R&D. You know, it's some sort of, you know, you give it whatever name and you call it R&D. So therefore, my sense is that we need to attack this issue. It's a very critical issue that we have raised, not just by you know, issuing a kind of a fatwa saying that let India Inc. Allocate more funds for R&D, but as Mr. Shankar pointed out, we need to create an ecosystem that automatically encourages people to spend in R&D because that will give them more returns. Now, how do you do that? You do that by creating a market that is more vibrant, that values new products, new innovations, new technologies more than the usual run-of-the-mill stuff. So I think we need a real, you know, a system which attaches more importance to innovation and pays more premium for innovation, and it is then that you will realize that corporates will be automatically enthused to spend more on R&D instead of issuing a kind of you know, through statutory changes by saying corporate social responsibility, let companies spend more, they will get something in return. So if there's not real corporate social responsibility, you see then.
Sure.
What you need to do is create a system in which innovation, technology and new products, new services, excellence, efficiency, effectiveness, you see improvements, and therefore corporates are automatically enthused to spend more money there.
You know, I've got time for one final comment on the program, so I'm going to let Acharya have the final say on the show today. Close the show with your concluding remarks.
Well, I think the global, as I said, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit is the global conversation about entrepreneurship. India is the host. It can really organize and set the agenda. For me, that should be a showcase of India's skills, its entrepreneurs, and also where it thinks the global conversation should go on entrepreneurship as it relates to its own agenda. So issues of security and bilateral investment, trade, all of that through the entrepreneurial lens. And I think India comes out looking very strong out of this conference. And hopefully, you know, it leads to some further discussions around investment protocols, technology transfer, and all the things that we've talked about, you know, across the board.
All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank my guests, Secy Bhattacharya, Ajay Shankar, Nishith, Acharya, and Krishna Sharma for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.